so excited to be joined with Ryan Pintado-Vertner. He is the founder and principal of Smoketown, where he helps brands and entrepreneurs change the world. Hey, Ryan.
Hey.
How are you?
You know, we're all holding it. We're all holding it together, right?
All things considered, yes. So let's dive right in. You're such an innovator and you have so much incredible CPG experience. So walk us through a little bit about your background and how your background in traditional CPG has really influenced the work you're doing at Smoketown.
Yeah, I always tell the story of my background by splitting it in two. The first half of my adult life, I was an activist. I worked in the nonprofit sector, completely passionate about and committed to changing the world. And then I went to business school, decided to change careers and bring that passion for changing the world into the consumer packaged goods industry. I have been in CPG for about 13 years now. I kind of stopped counting after the 12th year. And it's included working in kind of every conceivable brand role at companies like Clorox, Tyson, and Conagra Brands.
And it is such a competitive industry, as we know. So what's the secret to unlocking ROI in sales, marketing, and innovation?
Yeah, what we find is that there's three places where especially emerging brands take shortcuts that wind up costing them in terms of the ROIs that they drive. The first place is in the degree to which they understand their consumer. We talk about that as consumer empathy. That can sometimes feel easy because you just assume that the consumer is yourself, but that's a trap that many entrepreneurs fall into. And once a company gets above $5-10 million in revenue, it's definitely not, you're definitely not selling to yourself anymore. And you have to understand who that consumer is in order to optimize all of your trade, marketing, and innovation plans against them. The second place where we see companies stumble a bit is in their just discipline and rigor around measuring and evaluating ROI. When you're building a company that's growing fast and has 1,000 things going on, it can be easy to skip that step. And yet it's in many cases, the single biggest opportunity to improve profitability that companies have, to be smarter about chasing and understanding the ROI of their trade and marketing and innovation investments. A third place where we lean in with companies as we get them to improve their ROI is to change their planning processes when it comes to planning sales and marketing activity. That can often happen in silos, where the sales VP is building a plan and marketing is building a distinct plan, and finance may or may not be fully engaged in both of those. Processes that integrate finance, marketing, and sales will increase the level of ROI that you get from those investments. And then the last thing is there's a lot of money lost in poorly scoping job responsibilities and providing ineffective processes and tools to help team members thrive. So you may bring in your first CMO or head of marketing, and you don't quite define the job quite right, or you get the right person in the right job, but they don't have the tools and the support around them that they need to have the level of impact that they could. So those are a few of the things that we tend to focus on.
You're truly passionate, Ryan, about activism and brand building, and you work with a lot of consumer brands who are building very purpose-driven companies. And I have to ask, what do today's consumer brands get wrong about being purpose-driven and authentic?
Yeah, Rebecca, it's a really important question right now. We've all had the experience of seeing brands navigate their response to Black Lives Matter, navigate their response to the murder of George Floyd. Should I say something? Should I not? And here's our biggest advice. Whatever a brand does, it must engage in the work with authenticity and with a commitment to the long run. Here's what I mean by that. the problems that we're trying to solve in the world, whether it's structural racism or it's climate change or like fill in the blank issue, they are intractable, deeply embedded, super complicated issues that simply don't go away because you tweeted, or they don't go away because you participated in, Blackout Thursday. It's going to take years, decades to unravel some of these issues. And therefore, brands that engage should engage with the intention of having an impact and recognizing that that impact is going to take time. The second piece of that is this is not easy stuff. There will be trolls. There will be pushback. There will be cancel culture that comes for you. And if an organization does not have the internal fortitude, like to have really committed to doing the work, the first blowback that comes through will wipe out the effort and will have wasted everyone's time and disappointed a lot of people. So the two things that we focus on are being authentically committed to it so that it's really coming from the heart and coming from a place where you have the fortitude to stick with it, and the recognition that the work has to happen over a long period of time, and it's not just a one-time campaign.
You do work with CEOs and executives at these brands. And for a lot of people, it's a sensitive subject. They might not be well-versed in leading authentically, especially around issues with diversity and inclusion. So I'm wondering, how do you help them find their brand's purpose, and not only find it, but help connect them to it and lead in that authentic way?
We take teams through a process that we call finding the big fight. And the big fight is, like, we define that as the narrowly defined way that the brand wants to have a real impact in changing the world, measurable impact in changing the world. And the first step that we take when we lead companies through this is to start with really vulnerable, authentic, real conversations about what the team cares about, the leadership team. Where are they on these issues? What level of alignment do they have internally? Where do they feel stretched just enough to not feel like they're out beyond what they can commit to, and to be prepared to own that. Not every CEO is ready to do what Ben & Jerry's is doing, for example. Not every CEO can say out loud that white supremacy is a problem. They might not even know what that term means, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that you're somewhere on the journey and you need to work your way, and you need to be honest about which step in the journey you're on, and build a campaign and build a commitment that's anchored in what you yourself feel comfortable with, or at least, we all need to get a little uncomfortable. But if teams push themselves to the brink of internal dissonance where they absolutely cannot authentically commit to what they're doing, then frankly, it's just a matter of time before that work dissolves and crumbles. So our first step is to really just do an honest gauge of where the team is, how far they can stretch, and build from there.
And you guys have such a great presence when it comes to being open about your activism in the space. And besides, I have to ask, besides leading by example, how are you helping to encourage diversity and inclusion within this industry?
Yeah, let's unpack diversity and inclusion and kind of have a real conversation. Despite many billions of dollars having been invested in diversity and inclusion, the level of change and representation and leadership and ownership in terms of folks of color is in some industries completely negligible. In other words, and in other industries, it's been incremental or marginal at best. So we have to ask ourselves, what are we trying to accomplish with diversity and inclusion work? And what is it that stopped D&I from being effective in so many other instances? So when I'm engaged in these conversations and when I'm helping leaders work through what their priorities are and how they're going to invest, we spend a lot of time thinking about, well, what are you really trying to accomplish? And if you're going to pursue D&I, which, to be clear, is not work that we do. D&I is a discipline that Smoketown doesn't directly participate in. But we can say, hey, if you're going to do D&I work, how do you make sure that it sticks? How do you make sure that it actually has the desired impact and does what it says that it's going to do, as opposed to winding up being part of the substantial body of wasted investment that ultimately didn't actually change culture, didn't change representation to a meaningful enough degree to actually make a dent in institutional racism.
And I completely agree that I think diversity and inclusion, it is such an all-encompassing term that we've been throwing around very loosely. And it's really about learning and educating ourselves and what exactly that means. And I have to ask, though, are there some brands out there or companies that are just getting it right?
That's a good question. There's a couple of ways that I can answer that. And I'm going to answer it from my bias, from my lens, which is I am not just focused on whether a company is internally inclusive and diverse. I'm also focused on whether a company is externally having an impact on the world beyond the employees that walk in the door every day or the employees that log on every day. That for me is where is what we're all trying to get to, or at least what I'm trying to help companies get to. And there are a few examples that come to mind of teams that seem to me, from the outside looking in, to have really gotten it and figured some things out.
A lighter, happier, future, forward-leaning note. Let's talk about what's ahead for Smoketown as it relates to the business. What excites you most about Smoketown?
We have the right focus and the right tools in the perfect kind of window. Not every entrepreneur gets to have what they are passionate about line up with what the market needs at sort of exactly the right time. And I believe we have that. Because of the effect of COVID-19 on the economy, you're more companies than ever, especially emerging brands, are going to be trying to think about how to maximize ROI to extend their cash runway, to minimize their need for doing another round of fundraising. And we have an amazing toolbox to support that work. Similarly to the discussion that we just had, there's I think probably an unprecedented, at least in modern times, an unprecedented number of leaders and executives trying to figure out how to pull their companies into the fight against institutional racism. I think a lot of that is sincere and genuine, and we happen to have a set of tools and an approach that help companies tackle that, and actually not even just that issue, but help companies figure out how they're going to align themselves better to climate change and a whole host of other ways to build purpose more deeply into their DNA. So I look at that and I'm optimistic about the lineup that we have from a tools and approaches and talent standpoint, and what it seems like the emerging brand industry needs.
I love it, because we've been hearing for the past few months that there's no playbook for COVID-19. There's no playbook for these conversations about diversity. But it turns out Smoketown actually does have a great playbook. So thank you, Ryan, for joining us today.
I appreciate it. Thank you.